This is Lab 6, Pivot Tables. Go ahead and download the files in the assignment link. You have a pivot tables.xlsx, which represents Excel file, so that would be your work file, and then an instruction file, which is the Word document. So I've already downloaded the instruction file. I'm going to now download and save my work file called Pivot Tables. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it. Make sure you enable editing or you will not be allowed to make any changes. I will now open my Word document from my taskbar, and pivot tables actually they aggregate data for you. It saves you a lot of time and trouble as far as making formulas and functions, and you'll see through this lab exactly what it does. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is open the pivot table file and then save it as pivot tables, your first and last name. So from the taskbar, I will bring up my Excel workbook, do File, Save As. There again, I'm putting mine on the desktop and call it Pivot Tables, your first and last name. Click Save. I will now open my Word instruction file. Using the data in the Sales Results worksheet, create a pivot table in a separate sheet of the workbook. Name the worksheet Sales by Supplier. And then let's do this a little bit later. Let's do the first part of that step first. So I'll bring up my Excel file. The easiest way to make a pivot table is click in the first cell that has the data that you want represented in the pivot table. And so in this case it would be B3, because B3, C3, D3, etc. are our column headings, and then all of the data is in the range below it. So if you're in the first cell, at least in the pivot table, when we go to insert this pivot table, it will automatically guess the correct range of data that we want. Otherwise, you're going to have to, if you're not in the pivot table, you're going to have to go and select the range. So it just makes it easier. One less step you have to worry about. So up on the ribbon, click on the Insert tab. And the very first group called Tables, the very first button says Pivot Table. Click on it. And right here where it says Select a Table or Range, if you'll notice, it's picking up B3 through F64. That is the range that we wanted. Had we not been already in B3, we would have had to go in here and select this range. So there again, just one less step. The instructions say we want it in a new worksheet. So in the second half here where it says choose where you want to put the pivot table, make sure the radio button in front of new worksheet is selected. And then click OK. Bring up my directions file. Name the worksheet Sales by Supplier. So I'll bring up my Excel file, and we're sheet 1 tab on the bottom left corner of your screen. We're just going to rename that sheet. So we've learned two ways how to rename a tab, a sheet tab. You either double click and it will select the text and you start typing, or you can right click and from the shortcut menu click on rename. Either way, and type in Sales by Supplier. And then click in any open white space on a worksheet to deselect the tab. I'll bring up my Excel, and we want the supplier as the row labels and the store as the column labels and the sum of cells as the summarized value. So I'll bring up Excel, and what we're doing from the sales and supplier sheet, the sales results sheet, we have all these suppliers and all these categories of what they sell: automotive, computers, sporting goods, and all these stores that they sell them to, and all these amounts. So if I wanted to know this Speedy Auto Supplier his total sales for automotive items, I would have to do a formula that would add this cell, come down here, there's another one, add that one, try and find another one, add that one. So my formulas would be, you know, pretty massive. What a pivot table will do is do all these calculations for you. Save you so much time and trouble. So let me go back to the sales by supplier. Okay, what you have to do is over here in your pivot table, click anywhere where it says pivot table 1, click anywhere in that pivot table, and on the right hand side of your screen you should see now your pivot table fields. If you don't, up here on your pivot table, let's see, pivot table tools, analyze, you would have to click on field items and sets, and that should bring that up. So if it doesn't automatically come up when you click on the pivot table 1 chart on the left hand side of your screen, then click up here on your fields and items, etc. It should come in. Okay, the instructions here, we want the supplier as the row labels. Okay, so all you're going to do is on your pivot table fields, left click on supplier on the left hand side of your screen and drag and drop it in the bottom into the rows section. Now notice what happens over here in your pivot tables. It takes all the rows that were in your sales results here, because we did it by supplier. It takes all the suppliers in here and it lists one occurrence of each one of them. The next thing said the store, have the store as the column values. So left click on your store label in your pivot table fields, left click, hold that mouse button down and drag it to columns. Now you're building these values that you're about to appear are going to be all of the suppliers listed here, Dussel Brothers, Easy, and the stores that they sold to. Now the sales is a value, so none of these fields can go into the values section in your pivot tables unless they have values in them. Our sales column here is values. So going back to sales by supplier, drag and drop your cells into the values and let go. And now all these values here is all the suppliers and the stores they sold to and the amounts that was sold. It would have taken us forever to come back here on the sales result and do formulas to do that calculation. Pivot tables, there again, save you so much time and trouble. Okay, so let's bring our instruction sheet up. Change the contents of cell 4 to supplier and B3 to stores. Bring up my Excel file. A4, because it knows that it's rows, we have it as a row label over here. What this really represents is supplier. So we're going to change that title there. So to change it, click up here in the formula bar where it says row labels, and that's the same as the editing bar, and we're going to type in supplier, not with an S. Okay, and then either hit enter or the check mark to enter. And in B3, which is the columns that we did, but we want them to be stores, we're going to change that label from column labels to stores with an S. Okay. Step 4, apply the pivot style dark 3 to the table. Okay, so on your pivot style, so in your pivot table, you should have pivot table tools. Click on the design tab. You should now see pivot table style section. And just like the previous things we looked at, the various styles you can pick from, you have an up arrow, that'll take you row by row. You have a down arrow that'll take you row by row, but then you have the more button. The arrow pointing down with the line above. When you point to it, the screen tip says more, click on it and it's going to show you all. Now the instructions said pivot style dark 3. It's broken into categories. Here's light, here's medium. Let's scroll down and find dark. Hopefully it's in numerical order, so that's 1, 2, so pivot style dark 3, that's the one that we wanted. So click on it and it just makes it look nice. Okay, I'll bring up my instructions. We're on step 5. Format values as currency with a $sign and no decimal places. Bring up my pivot table, and I'm going to select all the cells that could possibly have values in them. So that's the range B5 to G17. Now some of these cells do not have values in them because that particular supplier didn't sell to that store. So the range B5 to G17. Up on your ribbon, let's click on the Home tab. And because we want to make sure it's a $sign with no decimals, in the number group, let's just drop down the number format, probably defaulting to general, and go all the way down to more number formats. Select it, and you're going to have a dialog box to choose options from. So we wanted it to be currency, so click on currency. Right here on the symbol, make sure you have a $sign. And decimal places where it says 2, we want that to be 0. So whether you click the drop down, the down pointing arrow twice, or you can even type in a 0, whichever method you want, and now click OK. And the values are formatted as the instructions say. Okay. Step 6, and you can look here, I guess we better, and just kind of spot check your values and make sure they correspond with the values here, and they did. Okay, now we're going to, from all this data that the pivot tables gather for you without having to make all these different formulas, we're going to make a chart from it. Make a chart. You can see here an example of what the chart's going to look like. So we're going to include a pivot chart, and we want it to be clustered column style, and we're going to apply style 6 to it. Then we're going to move it, etc. So let's go ahead and bring up our Excel worksheet file. Make sure you're clicked somewhere in the pivot table so that you have your pivot table tools, Analyze and Design tab. Click the Analyze tab, and in the Tools group, you have a button called Pivot Chart. Select it. Now, this chart is supposed to be a clustered column. So under the column, the very first one I'll point to is clustered column. So that's the one we want. So click on it. Then click OK to accept it. Once it comes in to the worksheet, we need to change it to, right here, style 6. So with the chart selected, if you go to the Pivot Tool Chart Tools, click the Design tab, you have your chart styles there. I'm just going to go ahead and click on the More button. I want style 6. There again, hopefully it's in numerical order, and it is. I'll click on style 6. Now we want to move and resize it so that the upper left corner is in A20 and the lower is in G37. We've done that on the previous lab 4 chart. So I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to drag it so that the upper left corner is in A20, and then let go, and the lower right corner is G, so I'm going to have to move it, G37. So it looks like it's just trying to make it the same width as the data in the pivot table. The pivot charts, they're trying to line it up with the pivot table. Okay, bring up my Word document for the instructions. Okay, hide all the field buttons on the chart, and it should end up looking like this. So bring up my Excel worksheet, and the field buttons are the sum of cells and supplier and store. If you click on the plus sign, and make sure the chart is selected. If it's not, click on it. And then you have, oh, let me find it. My bad, it's not there. What we want to do here, I'm sorry, I'm going from 2010 to 2013. right click on any one of the buttons. It wouldn't matter it's sum of cells or supplier, just right click. And you should have the option that says hide all field buttons on chart. So if you just want to hide the one that you're clicking on, you'd hide that particular, just hide value field button. We want to hide all of them, click on it, and they're all gone. Okay, bring up your, I'm going to go ahead and save it just to be safe. Bring up your instruction file. And we are down on step 7. So it looks like we're going to make another pivot table. So using the sales results data to create a second pivot table in a separate sheet in the workbook. So we're going to call it computer sales by month. We're going to have the months as our rows and the store as our columns, and we're going to have, of course, the sales as the summarized value. So I will bring up my Excel worksheet. I need to go back to Cell Results tab. There again, the easiest way to create a pivot table is to be in the first cell that you want in that table. And the first cell is B3 because it has our column headings. That way Excel can figure out by itself what data we want. It can look down here at the end and see there's nothing else after row 65, so it'll know to stop there. Okay, so up on your ribbon, click on the Insert tab. In the Tables group, click on the Pivot Table button. It is guessing the right range because we were in B3. We want it in a new worksheet, so make sure the radial button in front of new worksheet gets selected and then click OK. They want us to change this sheet name, so it came in as sheet 4. So the sheet 4 tab at the bottom of your screen, rename it to Computer Sales by Month. And then click in any cell to deselect it. So you can see the first pivot table we did sales by supplier. So all of our suppliers were on our row headings. We're going to do computer sales by month now. And let me fix it. I got too many B's in there, so I just had to right click rename and edit it. Okay. In computer sales by month tab, click anywheres in the pivot table 2 area. When you do, all your pivot table fields should appear. We want the month as the row labels this time, so left click on the month table, field table, name, hold that mouse button down and drag it to the row labels. Left click on the store field name, hold that mouse button down and drag it to the columns. And of course we want the sales as the value. Oosh. Month on the rows. Oosh. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So you'll see here, your row labels are your months, 1 through 12. And we have our stores as our column headings, as opposed to the previous one we made, were our suppliers. We were looking at our suppliers this time and how much they sold to each store. Now we're looking at each month, how much was sold to each store. There again, if we had to go back to this worksheet and try and figure that out, we would have a lot of calculations. So this just saves you so much time and trouble. Okay, bring up my instruction file. We're on step 8. Change the contents of A4 to month and B3 to store, because in a pivot table it defaults to row labels, but our rows are months, so we want to give it a more meaningful name such as months, and our columns are actually our stores, so instead of saying column labels we want to call it store. So this is just to make it look better, to understand it more. I'll bring up my Word document. We want to apply the pivot style dark 3 again to the pivot table. So I'll bring up my Excel file. Just make sure the pivot table is selected somewhere so that you have your pivot table tools tabs. Click on the design tab and the pivot styles. I'm going to click on the more button so I can see all of them. We want dark, so we're going to have to scroll down, and we want dark style 3. So your screen tip should come up and say pivot style dark 3, and click on it. I'll bring up my Word document. So we did 9, we're on 10. Format the values as currency with a $sign, no decimals. I will bring up my pivot table. And all the values are in the range of B5 to G17. So select the range B5 to G17. Up on your ribbon, click on the Home tab. And in the number group, on General, let's go all the way down to more number formats, because we want to make sure we have currency. So click on currency under category. Decimal places should be 0. Click your down arrow twice or type in a 0 and make sure the symbol is a $sign, and then click OK. I'll bring up my Word document. Step 11, filter the report by category. Then apply a filter to the computer category only. And then we're going to filter by the store Green Spring Club. So bring up your Excel pivot table. And if we just want to see the category of computers sold, what we have to do here is we're going to have to apply a filter. And we want to filter by category. Going back to my sales results. This is just a massive amount of data that we're trying to make sense out of. Our category is automotive, computer, sporting goods. So whatever the supplier was selling to these stores, whether it be computer goods or sporting goods, we want to see and use a filter to see how many money-wise, value-wise, or sales-wise, how many computers were sold to Green Spring Club. You know, how much money did they sell to that? So let me bring up Excel. I want to go to computer sales by month. So over here on your pivot table fields, in the bottom section, you have a filter group. We need to filter by category. So left click on the category field name, drag and drop it in the filter group. Now look, right when you did that, right in cell A1, you had a category and a filter come up. Now we want to apply the filter for computers. So right where here it says category A1 and B1 says all. Click that drop down arrow in B1, and right now all the values you see in this pivot table include accessories, apparel, automotive, computer, etc. We only want to see the computer. So click on computer and click OK, and you will see now in cell B1 it's saying that this is filtered for only computers. Notice the funnel cloud, or the funnel there. Instead of saying all, it says computers, and it changed to a funnel, which means that it is filtered. Don't do this, but I'm going to go back. Go forward. You can see how the pivot table changes. This is everything all. Then I go back and I'm seeing just the computer values. This is all values. Okay, and then we want to see just the Green Spring Club. So where it says store, you have a drop down arrow. Notice how it says select all, and it has all the stores. We only want to see Green Spring. So you're going to have to either uncheck mark everything except the green, or if you click on the select all and uncheck mark everything and then just select Green Spring, you can do it that way. And so now I have this by the store Green Spring Club only, computers only. So that's how you can filter and see anything. As far as this filter is concerned, I can look at everything. I can look at just at furniture at certain stores. So, and it gives you those values in just a heartbeat, that fast. Okay, let's bring up the Word document. Step 12, we want to include a pivot chart using line with markers. I'll bring it up. I want to do a chart. So there again, I'm just going to click anywhere in the pivot table. In my pivot table tools analyze tab, in the tools section, you have pivot chart. Click on it. We want line with markers. So under the all charts, select the line and point to each style that you have at the top until you see your screen tip change to line with markers, and then click OK. So now we have a line with markers representation of our pivot table, which is Green Spring Club's sales for computers. Okay, the next step is we want to this chart, we want to add a linear trend line. We're going to apply style 15. Then we're going to move the chart so the upper left corner is in B17, the lower right is in H34, and then we're going to hide all those fill buttons again. So bring up my pivot table. Make sure you click on the chart somewhere in it so that you get your chart elements plus sign button. Click on it. You'll notice you have the option that says trend line. It has an arrow to the side, which means you have more options that's going to appear, so click on it. And our instructions said to add a linear trend line, so select linear, and you see it comes into your chart here. The next thing was apply style 15. So on the pivot chart tools tab, the design, whether you want to click the more button or however you want to access these styles, point to the style that says style 15 and then click on it to apply it to the chart. We want to move the chart so that the upper left corner is in B17, and I'll let go, and the lower corner is in H34, which it really is, so you really don't have to change that. And then we want to hide all field buttons. So it's got categories, sum of cells. Those are your field buttons. Just right click, hide all field chart buttons. Go ahead and save your chart. So the directions now is save it, check it, make sure it appears as you see right here, and submit it. If you have any problems, just contact me. Good luck.